Welcome to Philosophy 3400. We're going to look at shortening time, which is a very short lecture, appropriately enough, here in Kant's Lectures on Ethics. This is on page 162. Takes up not even half the page. So let's just have a look at this. There's a paragraph and then a note explicating that paragraph, giving us an example. Shortening time. This is very short and yet very profound. Our experience of time, one thing should be clear, is we don't always experience time exactly the same way. And using our time wisely is something that Immanuel Kant is concerned with in this section. There are various ways, Kant writes, of shortening the time in which we live, and various expressions of it. The more attention we give to time, the more we feel that it is empty. If you don't believe me, if you ever worked a really tedious job where you're looking at the clock, waiting to get off work, you've probably never felt more empty than those moments. Can the end of my shift hurry up and get here? And that, in a sense, seems to make it even take longer. Thus, for instance, good, thank you, Immanuel Kant. When we watch the clock, time becomes long. Apparently this was even possible in the 1700s in Prussia. I mean, yes, they had clock towers and church bells that would ring, and yet I know for sure there were not as many clocks in Immanuel Kant's time. They were not as present as they are today. For instance, we all carry these things around with us on our smartphones, for example, or wear them on our arms. When we watch the clock, Kant claims, time becomes long, but he who has something to do does not notice time, and it appears to him shorter. And this is a good thing, for time to feel not like it's dragging on, for ourselves to not feel empty, but instead for time to be sort of flying by, right? Tempus fugit, time is flying, and we are having fun, and we are doing something that matters to us. He who has something to do does not notice time, and it appears to him shorter. When our attention is absorbed by objects, we do not notice time, and it is short. And this is a wonderful thing. But as soon as we direct our attention to measuring time and to observing it in classrooms and in work environments, this is one reason why in advance experiences in a classroom are sort of condemned to kind of alienation, frustration, and a feeling of empty time. Because it's on clock time, and people are constantly, including even instructors, have to look and see, what time is it, how much time do I have left, is there enough time? So, our life, Kant concludes, is the longer, the more full it is, right? So one point he's making here, right, is, measured by clock time, so to speak, we might think a person's life is longer based on the number of years they've lived. If you live to the age of 82, you've lived longer than somebody who lives to the age of 77. However, I think Kant's point here is, no, wrong. It might seem that way. However, it's the person whose life has been active in a meaningful sense and who has lost track of time more that has lived the better life here and in the more substantively, qualitatively longer life. Nothing worse, I think. Kant could imagine nothing worse, for instance, than being utterly enfeebled by age on a bed in a nursing home, unable to move, suffering from dementia perhaps, and just feeling, time going by, on a clock somewhere, just waiting to die. That would be atrocious, and yet somebody could live in that state for 10 or more years, right? And thus seemingly have a longer life than somebody else who was incredibly active right up until the end. Note. So yes, let's have a look at this note. Miles near to town seem shorter than those farther away. Boy, isn't that true? It's kind of distortion of perspective here that is a clue, is a clue to something important, an indication of something that we should notice here. As we proceed on our way, our attention is diverted by many objects near town, but farther away there is nothing to see and the miles seem long. Okay. I believe that, right? Driving through, say, the Central Valley, remote parts of the Central Valley on 99, there's nothing much to see and the miles seem long. You get into sort of an urban area, maybe, or an area with some sorts of, landmarks and whatnot, Yosemite, whatever the case might be, and suddenly there's a bunch of things to sort of look at and be tempted by and find interesting and diverted by, etc. Let's stop there, let's check that out. Whereas there can be other places where there's just, and I use the Central Valley, but I really should use the Midwest and just the cornfields, from rural Illinois all the way through Nebraska, just endless sort of fields of corn going on and on with nothing else to really see. If at the end of the journey we look back, the journey seems to have been short, because except for a short length of it near to town, there was nothing to notice and to remember. In other words, all those sort of empty periods where there was nothing to do and you were sort of inactive and just moving, recede from memory altogether. It just seemed like emptiness. And the only thing that is memorable were the moments of activity when you were excited by something and thinking about it, and it was drawing your attention and maybe causing you to sort of stop and check it out. Okay, I think that's all we really need to do here with shortening time for today. Thank you for joining me.